when they disappear. No tears for black girls, like they were never here. But we remember, we'll speak their names.
On February 23rd, 2023, in the quiet town of Quincy, Illinois, a 911 call shattered the morning silence. A frantic voice reported gunshots at 616 Kentucky Street. When police arrived at the modest two-story home, they found a scene that would haunt this small community forever. Becky Bliefnick lay dead in her bathroom, struck by multiple gunshots. The 41-year-old mother of 3 had been living her worst nightmare, a contentious divorce that had turned increasingly bitter and dangerous. But this wasn't a random home invasion or burglary gone wrong. The evidence would reveal something far more sinister. Becky had been afraid. For months, she'd been telling friends and family that she feared for her life. Her estranged husband, Timothy Bliefnick, had been making threats. The divorce proceedings had become a battlefield, with custody of their 3 young sons hanging in the balance. Becky had even gone to court seeking an order of protection, but the system that was supposed to protect her had failed. The night before her murder, Becky had been out with friends, trying to maintain some normalcy in her increasingly chaotic life. She returned home to her children, tucked them into bed, and prepared for what she didn't know would be her final night alive. Sometime in the early morning hours, an intruder entered her home through a basement window. But this wasn't just any intruder. This person knew the house layout. They knew where to find Becky. They knew the children would be sleeping upstairs. The killer moved through the darkness with purpose, making their way to the bathroom where Becky would make her last stand. The investigation revealed chilling details. The basement window had been carefully removed from the outside, not broken, but methodically taken apart by someone who had time and knowledge of the house's construction. Footprints in the snow led investigators on a trail that would eventually point to one devastating conclusion. Timothy Bliefnick, the man who had once promised to love and protect Becky, had become her greatest threat. Phone records, surveillance footage, and forensic evidence began painting a picture of a man who couldn't accept that his marriage was over. A man who would rather see his wife dead than see her free. The most haunting detail? Just months before her murder, Becky had appeared on a game show called Family Feud alongside Tim. When host Steve Harvey asked what the biggest mistake in her life was, Becky had answered, laughing, "Saying yes to my husband when he asked me to marry him." The audience laughed. Tim smiled, but those words would prove to be tragically prophetic. What makes this moment even more chilling is what Tim said during that same appearance. When Steve Harvey asked the men what they thought their wives' biggest mistake was, Tim responded with an eerie calmness, "Not my mistake. I love my wife." But behind that smile was a man who would later stalk, terrorize, and ultimately murder the woman he claimed to love. The couple had met at Quincy University, where Tim was a star football player and well-known local salesman. They seemed like the perfect couple, successful, attractive, with 3 beautiful sons. But beneath the surface, their marriage was crumbling under the weight of Tim's controlling behavior and Becky's growing independence. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a pattern of escalating threats and controlling behavior. Tim had been monitoring Becky's movements, showing up at her workplace, and making her life a living hell. Friends and family members came forward with stories of his increasingly erratic behavior and his obsession with maintaining control over Becky's life. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. Tim had planned this murder with cold calculation. He had stalked his wife for weeks, learning her routines, studying her home. On the night of February 22nd, he rode his bicycle to her house under cover of darkness. Security cameras captured a shadowy figure on a bike riding toward Becky's home just before the murder and away from it just after. At 1:11 in the morning on February 23rd, Becky tried to call 911. She managed to dial 91126 before the phone was knocked from her hand. She had run to her bathroom, the only room with a lock, but it wasn't enough to save her. Tim kicked in the door and shot her 14 times with a 9mm handgun. None of the wounds were immediately fatal. Becky lay dying on her bathroom floor for several minutes, alone and in agony. The evidence was overwhelming. Tim Bliefnick was arrested and charged with his wife's murder. During the trial, prosecutors painted a picture of a man consumed by rage and entitlement. They showed how Tim had planned this murder, how he had stalked his wife, and how he had executed his plan with cold calculation. The jury heard testimony about Becky's fear, her attempts to protect herself and her children, and the system's failure to keep her safe. In the end, justice was served. Timothy Bliefnick was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His appeal was denied in November 2024, ensuring he will spend the rest of his life behind bars. But for Becky's 3 young sons, justice could never bring back their mother or erase the trauma of losing both parents in one horrific act of violence. Now, let me tell you about another case, one that received far less attention despite being equally tragic. Her name was Korryn Gaines, a 23-year-old Black woman and mother of 2 from Baltimore, Maryland. On August 1st, 2016, Korryn was shot and killed by police during a standoff at her apartment. But unlike Becky Bliefnick's case, which dominated national headlines for months, Korryn's story was largely ignored by mainstream media. Korryn had been living in fear too, not just of police, but of her abusive boyfriend, 39-year-old Kareem Courtney. Police reports show that Courtney had stalked, choked, and slapped Korryn, and possibly struck her with a chair just 1 month before her death. Like Becky, Korryn had tried to work with the system, cooperating with police to get a warrant for Courtney's arrest. But when police came to serve that warrant, they found Korryn armed with a shotgun, terrified and convinced they were there to kill her. The standoff lasted 6 hours. Korryn live-streamed parts of it on Facebook, showing her 5-year-old son asking what the police were trying to do. "They trying to kill us," the child replied when his mother asked. Unlike Becky's case, where the victim was portrayed as an innocent nurse and devoted mother, Korryn was immediately labeled as a dangerous criminal who brought her death upon herself. But here's what the media didn't tell you about Korryn Gaines. She had suffered severe lead poisoning as a child, just like Freddie Gray, another Baltimore victim of police violence. The lead poisoning had caused permanent brain damage, affecting her impulse control and ability to assess threats. She had grown up in the same over-policed, underserved neighborhoods of West Baltimore, where calling police for help often meant becoming a victim yourself. Korryn couldn't find safety anywhere. She was harassed by police while driving. In her own home, she experienced abuse at the hands of her daughter's father. When she tried to protect herself by cooperating with police against her abuser, those same police ended up killing her. Her 5-year-old son was shot in the crossfire, suffering injuries to his arm and face. The contrast in media coverage is stark and telling. Becky Bliefnick's story was covered by every major news outlet. Her case was featured on 48 Hours, Dateline, and countless true crime podcasts. The Family Feud angle made it irresistible to media outlets, a perfect, tragic story of domestic violence with a compelling hook. Korryn Gaines, meanwhile, was the 9th Black woman killed by police in 2016, but hers was the only case that received any significant national coverage at all. And even then, the coverage focused on whether she deserved to die, whether she was a good victim worthy of sympathy. The media questioned her parenting, her mental state, her decision to arm herself. They didn't ask why a young mother felt so unsafe that she believed she needed a gun to protect herself and her children. This disparity in coverage reflects a broader pattern in how our society values different victims. When a white woman like Becky Bliefnick is murdered, she becomes a symbol of innocence destroyed. Her story is told with empathy and nuance. We hear about her dreams, her struggles, her attempts to escape an abusive situation, We understand that the system failed her. When a Black woman like Korryn Gaines is killed, the narrative immediately shifts to what she did wrong. Did she comply with police orders? Was she a good mother? Did she bring this on herself? The same empathy and understanding extended to white victims is rarely offered to Black women. Both women were failed by systems that were supposed to protect them. Becky's restraining order was denied. Korryn's calls for help against her abuser led to the very confrontation that killed her. Both women were mothers trying to protect their children. Both women died because the men in their lives, whether an abusive husband or an abusive boyfriend, created situations that put them in mortal danger. Yet only one of these stories captured the nation's attention. Only one of these women was seen as a perfect victim, deserving of our tears and outrage. This is the reality that Black women face every day. Their pain is minimized, their deaths are justified, their stories are ignored. The statistics are staggering. Black women are killed by intimate partners at rates significantly higher than white women, yet their cases rarely make national news. When Black women go missing, there are no wall-to-wall cable news coverage, no viral social media campaigns, no celebrity advocates. Their families have to fight just to get local news coverage, let alone national attention. This isn't just about media coverage. It's about how our society values Black women's lives. When we don't tell their stories, when we don't demand justice for their deaths, when we don't see them as worthy victims, we send a message that their lives don't matter as much as others. Becky Bliefnick's story is important. Her death was a tragedy that should never have happened. Timothy Bliefnick deserved to spend the rest of his life in prison for what he did to the mother of his children. But Korryn Gaines' story is equally important. Her death was equally tragic. The system failed her just as completely as it failed Becky. The difference is that Becky's story fits our comfortable narrative about domestic violence, a good woman victimized by an evil man. Korryn's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about racism, police violence, and the intersection of domestic abuse and state violence. It's easier to ignore her story than to grapple with these complex realities. But we cannot continue to ignore the Korryn Gaineses of the world while mourning only the Becky Bliefnicks. Every woman deserves to have her story told with dignity and compassion. Every mother deserves to be seen as more than the circumstances of her death. Every victim deserves justice, regardless of the color of her skin. Until we can extend the same empathy to all victims, until we can see Black women as worthy of our tears and our outrage, we will continue to fail the very people who need our protection the most. The question isn't whether these women were perfect victims. The question is whether we're willing to fight for justice for all women, not just the ones whose stories make us comfortable. Both Becky Bliefnick and Korryn Gaines deserved better. They deserved to live. They deserved protection. They deserved justice. And they both deserve to be remembered not just as victims, but as human beings whose lives had value, whose deaths diminished us all, and whose stories demand that we do better. Coming up next, we have the full preview of No Tears for Black Girls by Jada Truth on Datsot Records. Thank you for listening to No Tears for Black Girls. If you enjoyed our show, please be sure to leave a 5-star rating and positive review to help spread the word about our podcast. Stay loved, stay blessed, and stay safe. This is Samantha Paul.
It's a proven fact that every person in the world comes from a Black woman, but we're still the most disrespected. We hold it down in public and fight storms in private. This one's for the missing, the silenced, and the sisters and sons we still speaking for. We here. Count the names, hold the line. don't fold, we design. No tears for black girls, we turn prayers into plans. Turn them up, say a name, hold space, we gon' live where we stand. No tears for black girls, we turn prayers into plans. Build it up, say a name, hold space, we gon' live where we stand. Stand up. Makeup in her purse, not for glam, but for bruises. He said love, then he swung, then he circled excuses. Called 3 times, filed papers, they barely enforced. He was out by the weekend, came back like a force. Prior on a jacket from a year, she hit his gun. Took the charge for his case, thought the time ain't won. He turned his back that night, fear snapped like a wire. Broke in a moment from a decade on fire. Courtroom felt art, judge reading a life. They said premeditation, not survival of strife. Jury saw a headline out the years she endured. They gave her life in the cell, said the past made it sure. I held my breath in the closet, counted seconds like prayers. If I make it to the morning, maybe somebody cares. Protect black women, we don't celebrate death, we indict the neglect. When safety is a myth, then the cycle collects. Truth, we keep receipts. Count the names, hold the line. Hold the line, we don't fold, we design. No tears for black girls, we turn prayers into plans. Turn them up, say your name, hold space, we gon' live where we stand. Stand tall, we got you. Flyer on the pole, kept peeling in the rain. Aunt at the vigil, repeating the same name. Headline scroll past, low clicks, no spin. Till a body was discovered with details they won't print. Silent whispers in the barbershop, rumors in the thread. About shadows and the value placed upon the dead. We don't spread what we can't prove, but we name what we can. Facts only. There's a pattern in the silence when it's one of our fam. Last seen late night, ride share never ping. Gone. Caseworker on vacation, phone never rings. No help. We archive every date, every post, every map. Pressure on the desk till they feel every tap. Push back. I kept calling her number, let it ring to the end. Calling, saved her voice on my phone, played it back like a hymn. Remember, say her name. If the story gets told only after she's gone. Too late. We failed her in daylight, so we write her a song. We ride for her. From Brianna to Sandra, from Nia to Korryn. Every name is a dot, every loss cuts within. Family. We build tables, not walls, create space, not divide. When the system fails us, we become the guide. When the truth. Late run to the store for milk and little diapers. Phone on 3%, wallet by the wipers. Lights in the rear view, hands on the wheel. No license registration, breathing steady to heal. Called his mama like I'm cool, be home in a sec. Audio cut short, then the dash cams check. They said he reached wrong, she said that ain't him. He moved like a father with a life to tend. She stood in the robe, talking soft to the press. Clutching on a receipt like a cross on a chest. No chief at the podium, just forms in a frame. A statement in the inbox, no one taking the blame. He kissed his baby's forehead, whispered, be right back. I still hear the door click, then the world turned black on. We remember. We don't traffic and rage, we demand what is due. Justice, policy and charges when the facts prove true. Accountability, we want the truth. We carry what they drop, we repair what they break. If they won't build a bridge, we become the span they take. Every prayer's a blueprint, every tear builds the foundation. We don't just survive the storm, we become the transformation. Transform, we rise, we build. Count the names, hold the line. Hold the line, we don't fold, we design. No tears for black girls, we turn prayers into plans.